Hey everyone, welcome to the Language of series. I'm Amy Lancy. In case this is the first time you're tuning in to my channel or to any of my videos, I am a communication consultant and I help business owners speak their audience's language. And I firmly believe, and I see this in my work all the time, that there are language barriers all around us. It's just not just a matter of knowing a language governed by locality such as Spanish or Chinese. It's more about, we all have languages in our expertise and in our industries. And if we can just cross those barriers, then we can make some real big change in this world. So I have my amazing and dear friend Nancy Loeffler with me. Nancy, can you say hi to the audience and tell us a little bit about your business and what
Hi,
you do?
everyone. Yes, thank you, Amy, for this opportunity. I am a grief journey guide. I created my own proprietary program to help others to navigate their grief journeys. And one of the reasons I did this is because when I started my own grief journey over 20 years ago, when my daughter died, I couldn't find the kind of support that I was looking for. There was a lot of really great stuff out there, and there still is, but what didn't quite fit to what I was looking for. So, and at the time, I didn't exactly know what that was. And
Mhm.
over time, I created a path to of my own healing, my own grief journey to bring me into where I am today, which is a place of meaning, purpose, and joy. So I help my clients to discover that and reclaim that for themselves.
And I think that's amazing, Nancy. And I've often told you how, you are at the frontier of something that our culture just, the American culture just, we don't want to look at grief.
Right.
We immediately associate grief with death, and that's another no-no topic.
Exactly.
And that's not doing anyone any justice by not looking at any of this.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but I also, since we started our friendship years ago, you know, I I'm guilty of associating grief directly with death,
Hmm.
but now I have a better sense of what grief really is. So if you could just tell the audience what is grief from your perspective and your experience, just so we can just clear that all up.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Grief is the normal response to any kind of a loss.
Hmm.
And like you, I thought it was the loss of a loved one. I thought we experienced grief when a loved one died.
Yeah.
And while we do, that's very true, there's so many other places where we experience a loss. It could be the loss of our beloved pet, or our jobs,
Hmm.
or a relationship. Moving to a new place could bring up loss, especially without support, even with support. Um, and it's really anytime your life changes, either in a quick way or a drastic way, and you have to say goodbye or grieve or honor what went before. Even retirement can bring up grief, even if it's something you've been looking forward to for your entire life. So anytime our lives don't turn out the way that we wanted them to, or when there's a change that takes us into a new territory that we're not familiar with, we experience grief.
Yeah. And so when you exposed that to me, it made me realize, gosh, there's all these different points in my life where I have experienced grief, and a lot of it was had to do with the loss of a loved one, but then there was even more that had to
Hmm.
do with other things, just big changes in my life. And like you said, whether they were good changes or not so great changes, like
Right.
just change itself forces us to say goodbye to something old, something that we had held on to for such a long time, and that's really hard.
Yeah, we don't like saying goodbye. We want to take everything with us. And yet, unless we release things, we won't be able to have space to for newness. So
Yes.
that's a part of it as well. And grief is really a lifelong journey. We think that we grieve and it's over, and we grieve and it's over. And whenever we experience the grief, especially the big ones, all of the repressed grief or the unhealed grief says, okay, there's my opening. I'm going to let myself be known too. And that's sometimes why grief can feel overwhelming, because it's all the unresolved grief that's coming to the surface, wanting
Absolutely.
attention. Yeah.
Yes. And I know so many people who need help with that because
Mhm.
I think that's the thing. Unresolved grief is also unconscious grief.
Exactly.
Um, and we don't even
Exactly.
realize it's there.
Right.
So, before we go further, I wanted to also clarify for the audience now that we've defined what grief is, let's define what is the language of grief.
Yeah. That's a great question. The language of grief is really a language of feelings. I feel sad.
Mhm.
I feel pain. I feel alone. I don't want to feel that feeling. I don't want to feel the pain. I don't want to feel the devastation. And so it's a language of feelings.
Yes. And you know what? I'm just going to speak directly to the viewer who's watching this that Nancy just said a whole bunch of different key phrases that we all could be looking out for when someone is unconsciously going through grief. So thank you. Thank you for presenting those examples, Nancy, because, you know, now that we've talked about grief in this light, now it's even more important for us to recognize when we are speaking about grief for ourselves and speaking when others are speaking about grief around us, so that way
Mhm.
we can recognize it and probably better help them with their needs.
Right. And there's also myths of grief, like if I stay busy, I won't have to feel the feelings because I'll be busy doing this and the feelings will go away. They won't go away. They'll just get more intense, and then it's like a pressure cooker. You reach a point where you can't contain them anymore, and that's again when they feel overwhelming and intense. Where if we meet them along the way, we can uh, shift them, disperse them, allow them to go where they go rather than inside of our bodies. And as you know, unresolved grief can affect our bodies. You know, we
Yeah.
can, it causes stress, and we all know what stress does to our bodies.
Oh yeah, it messes up. It messes up
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Sleep, energy levels, just
Hmm.
emotional, mental well-being. It's a slew of things. So no, yeah, definitely just when I could definitely see how grief, when not acknowledged and not addressed, it just build up that internal tension of that and I think that the problem is that when it's unconscious grief, and which is a lot of grief, then
Hmm.
you can't adequately address the tension.
Exactly. You know
Yeah.
something's wrong, but you don't know what it is. And like anytime we're feeling stuck and we don't know what it is, there's a fear as to what it's gonna take to meet that. And when we meet our feelings as they are, all of our feelings just want to be met as they are. You know, there's the feelings are energy, and when we
Yes.
meet those feelings, they're able to move through it. One of the images I like using is like a cloud. You know,
Hmm.
clouds come and go, and there's all different kinds of clouds, and there's heavy storm clouds.
Hmm.
And heavy storm clouds are dark and they look a little bit oppressive. And after they rain, they move on through. So a storm cloud is not going to stay here and just keep getting heavier and heavier and heavier until we're all walking around, under the little storm cloud. It rains and it moves through. And the same is true with our difficult and painful feelings. When we meet them, they're able to get lighter and move through. And that doesn't mean they don't come back again. They're
Hmm.
not exactly the same when they come back.
I love that. It's not about banishing them. It's
Right.
about just transforming it into
Hmm.
something, which is probably why your book is called The Alchemy of Grief. So,
Absolutely.
by the
Yes.
way, everyone, Nancy wrote a book called The Alchemy of Grief. So, if you would like to buy it, and yeah, totally look into that.
Yeah,
It
it's available on Amazon.
Yes, absolutely. And I wanted to go back to something you said. You said that you said meeting people where they're at. I think that when it comes to seeing someone in our lives who has lost someone or has is going through a period of grief for whatever reason, we keep thinking, gosh, I don't know what to say to fix this. But what I'm
Hmm.
hearing from you is, what can I say to meet them where they're at?
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. And we can let them know that we're there for them. We can let them know that they can talk to us if they want to, or if they just want us to sit with them. Everybody meets grief, especially early on, in their own way. And sometimes when people hear me say that, they think, well, what if my way isn't the right way? There is no there is no right or wrong way.
Hmm.
And letting people know that you're not going to give them advice. There's no judgment. There's no shame. There's no. We've been taught that grief is something to hide,
Hmm.
and that maybe some people are afraid of the feelings. I'm just here initially to be here for you, to listen to you if you want me to sit with you if you don't want to talk, to bring you food if you need food, whatever it is that you need. That's what I'm here to do, and that's what those are easy things that other people can do as well. We don't have to be afraid to be with someone who's in grief. I know when my daughter died over 20 years ago, a lot of friends left because it made them uncomfortable, and I completely understand that.
Hmm.
And they weren't good. They told me that they didn't want to make me feel uncomfortable. They didn't want to bring up my daughter. Well, she was she was on my mind all the time. So mentioning her name was comforting to me.
Yes.
That's not the case with everyone. And sometimes people don't know what to say, so they say things, well, at least you have other children, or at least they're now in a better place. And I like to say that anything that starts with at least, stop yourself, because while all those things are true,
Hmm.
the person who's grieving needs to come to those realizations themselves. It's not helpful at the time to say, at least you have other children. Yes, I had another child, and that didn't um, take away from the fact that was devastated by my daughter's death. So
Yeah.
um, any of those things are not always helpful right when someone is going through grief. And another thing I think it's important to talk about here, we're coming up on the 1 year anniversary when everything shut down last year.
Yeah.
And I've been noticing associative memories are also a real thing with grief, something that brings up a memory and it puts you right back in that grief. And
Yes.
last year, we all went through a lot of grief for a lot of different reasons. So
Mhm.
I talked about how when things change quickly, we grieve what went before. The simple fact of not being able to get together and have a cup of coffee with a friend brought grief. So associative memories too. If someone says something like, um, I just heard this song and it takes me right back into the early days of my grief. Am I regressing? No, you're not. It's associative memories also put you back in touch with that feeling, and maybe it's time for you to heal it on a different levels. So being aware that associative memory, what they are, and that they can come up when you least expect it, is another aspect of grief and something to be
Mhm.
looking out for.
I love that you mentioned that because I definitely have had those moments. I mean, especially during the time of COVID and even before that, there are things that I've worked on with myself. And then I'm like, okay, I'm good. I got this. And then six
Right.
months later, something will happen. And then it'll trigger me to bring up that
Exactly.
associative memory. And I'll be like, gosh, no, I thought I was over this. Man, I'm disappointed in myself.
Yeah.
Maybe what am I doing here and what am I really talking about and blah blah blah. I go through that
Right.
whole
I'm a
vicious cycle.
failure. I didn't do my work right. All that stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the fact that you said, well, maybe it's just that you need to heal on a different level. It's like, yes, yes,
Mhm.
that explains it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's like, I worked so hard. I don't know. It's
Well,
not
we,
working.
we've all heard the analogy of peeling the onion. So that's what you're doing, peeling the onion, peeling another layer to get to something deeper, and you couldn't have gotten to that. If I had been presented with absolutely everything in the whole universe about grief
Yeah.
the first week that my daughter died, I wouldn't have survived. It
Yeah.
had to happen more gradually. And that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that I'm in the same place as I was before, but I can still be taken back to that moment, because that's another myth. Time heals all wounds, but it's what you're doing in that time. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that I will get over the death of my daughter. So many people say, but if I do this grief work, will I forget my loved one? No, your loved one always lives with you. And the reason that you're grieving for a loved one specifically is because of the relationship of love that you had with them.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. It's not because you have to say good. It's not like you can't ever think of them ever again. It's not like
Right,
you have to completely be in a life where they're never mentioned. That's not what it is. It's just
nope,
about and it's not even about being able to think about them and not cry ever. Like that's not even it either. It's just
right,
about being
right.
able to move forward, um,
Hmm.
and find peace.
Yeah, and I really believe that in everybody's grief journey, there are nuggets and gifts.
Hmm.
And one of the biggest ones that I received early on is that losing Leah is too high a price to not live the life that I was meant to live.
Hmm.
And that's what sent me on this path of creating something for myself that enabled me to find meaning and purpose and even joy.
I love that. I always get chills every time you tell me that story.
I know.
It's like wow, such a powerful moment. And I'm thinking about how we talked about you know it's about meeting the needs of somebody who is in grief, and it's not about being afraid to talk about grief. I kind of see how there's a dichotomy of people who don't want to talk about it because they're afraid to trigger the person, and
Hmm.
then I see also where people the at least people they're like, well, at least you have another child, or at least this didn't happen, or at least they're in a better place. So it sounds like you know like the happy middle is just to just see where the person is at and just see what is it that they really really need, as
Hmm.
opposed to putting out recommendations and trying to
Right.
fix everything.
Take your cue from them.
Yeah.
Many times people will say, I have a friend, the loved one just died. I want to send your book. Is this the right time? And I always say, I don't know. You can send it to them and tell them that I'm sending you this book. Read it when you're ready. But
Mhm.
because we don't know when, I would not have been open to that if someone had sent me something right away. People
Mhm.
did send me things like that, and I did eventually look at them, and some of them were helpful. But yes, take the cue from the person.
Mhm.
And I had people who would reach out to me to have lunch. There was We talked about Leah if I wanted to.
Mhm.
Just having someone come give me a call, or coming over and bringing food, that was such a huge help, because I didn't want to cook.
Mhm.
And uh, things like that. Meet people where they're at.
Yeah. How do you ask someone who's in grief whether they want to be alone or whether they want company?
Yeah. I ask them what they need right now, and if they don't know what they need, I tell them that I'm here for you, either on the phone. I can come. Well, can't come over right now exactly, but we can do a Zoom,
Yeah.
or um, what do you need? And it's we know how hard it is to say what we need. And someone who's grieving probably even has a more difficult time stating what they need. So uh, if they're not able to say what they need in that moment, I say, I'm here for you. Can I call you tomorrow at a certain time? Or can I stop by and bring you something? And most people recognize that as um, something that they either say yes or no to. And then eventually that they begin to move through those feelings and are able to know what they need. There's so many people though say, "Can you tell me how I can make things the way that were before?" And now that's when I know someone's really stuck, and maybe I
Mm.
can't help them. You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
we have to be ready to see that there are possibilities after this event, whether it's loss of a loved one or if we talk about a job.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so uh, when people are ready to work with you,
Mhm.
what does that look like? What does their journey with you look like?
Yeah. Well, as I said, I created my body of work from things that I did myself. And one of the first things I did was to turn to a present moment awareness practice that had already been established in my life.
Mhm.
And what I found is that when I was present to the feelings that were here it's a practice where you bring your feelings into your heart. When
Mhm.
I was able to be with my feelings in my heart, I was able to be with the pain of losing my daughter. I was able to be with those difficult feelings without the stories my head was spinning constantly.
Mhm.
My
Mhm.
head would try to slice and dice all the events to make the outcome be different. So I understand where the people who want things to be the same are coming from, and that wasn't going to happen. So it's learning how to be with what's here now.
Mhm.
It's learning how to get better at feeling, to learn how to feel those difficult and painful feelings without pushing them away, and one at a time. And we
Mm.
talked about all the onslaught of feelings that feel so overwhelming and intense. So we meet them one at a time. And it also connects us to so many other things. We talk about gratitude and self-care. And what does self-care look like when we're grieving? It may be different than um, what we normally think of self-care. Self-care for me early on in that part of my grief journey was making sure that I had enough nourishing foods to eat, because I thought if I had enough chocolate chip cookies, I wouldn't have to feel that pain. It was another way
Mhm.
of pushing those feelings away. But
Mhm.
the food and the rest enabled me to have a greater capacity to feel the feelings. So sometimes we start with basic things like that, and then with presence always gives us exactly what we need in each moment. So
Mhm.
we move through, connects us to our intuition,
Yeah.
connects us to what is here right now.
Mhm.
So it not only helps us to shift the feelings, it gives us insights, it gives me insights on where to go next. So when I work with someone, I create a safe place, and then being intuitive, I receive sacred questions for them.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then many times the questions make no sense to me, and I ask the question and they know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's a process of kind of like following the breadcrumbs. So we get present, I
Mhm.
ask questions. First it's teaching the practice. And once they've learned the practice, we follow the breadcrumbs. Sometimes it leads us to inner child work. Sometimes it leads us to what creatively do they need to do. It's really different for everyone.
Yeah.
So it's a unique program that follows their own needs. It's really a deep listening on my part, and holding space for them to do their work. It's really it's the most amazing work that I've ever done.
Mm. I mean, it makes sense that every that your program is different for everyone because you're meeting them where they're at. So and
Right,
everyone is at a different place.
right.
Um, and I think it's amazing what you do, because not only do you teach people how to tackle their grief, um, but you also teach them to be present, so that way they can apply that to other parts of their life in addition to
Yes.
grief, and also and move forward. It's
Hmm.
about tackling your grief and moving forward. That's really what
Right.
it is. So
Right. Yes, presence is something that helps, that works with everything. You know, it was something, as I said, I was already doing. I wasn't doing it for grief. I was doing it for, as a resource for daily living. And
mhm,
presence, the more and more I've been doing this for almost over, well, for over 25 years now.
mhm.
The more I'm present, the more nuances I see of what present moment awareness is and how impactful it can be for living our lives.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people need you, Nancy. I absolutely do. And speaking of those people, uh, we're basically almost wrapped up. I just need to let
Mhm.
people know how can they get in touch with you, because they really need. I know a lot of people need to get in touch with you.
Yeah, yeah. My website is beingwithgrief.com.
Mhm.
You can get in touch with me through my website. I also have a Facebook page, business page called Being with Grief, on Facebook. I have a private grief group also that you need to connect with me and ask me to put you in it. And it's private so that we can have a safe discussion, and people, we don't have concerns of people making comments, like, at least. So
Right.
it's a community that I'm growing right now. So if anyone is interested in that, get in touch with me in any of those ways. Also, Nancy at beingwithgrief.com is another way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nancy. I think we uncovered a lot of gold nuggets here, and I think this video will go out to the people who really need it. So, so thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you.
Um, and thank you everyone who is watching the Language of series. Give Nancy a round of applause and a seal of approval. And please tune in for more videos, where I'm going to be interviewing experts like Nancy, and just talk about language barriers in general. So bye everyone.